Welcome back to the High Performance Hub podcast. Today we are joined by someone with an incredible story of transformation. Jeff Iverson, homelessness to 15 years of meth addiction, then to founding two of the medical and mental health treatment centers, which are the two biggest in Nevada. He is helping change tens of thousands of people's lives. Jeff, a huge welcome, mate, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Good to be here, Tom. Honored.
Mate, so let's kick this off. I think it's the elephant in the room. How did that all start with you, mate?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. So, born and raised in Vegas. I mean, the short version of the story is growing up fairly rebellious, never did well in school, didn't really conform to the conventional not conventional wisdom, but like the conventional model. Like, graduate high school, go to college, and high school I didn't take very seriously. Started, just becoming more interested in partying and having a good time, and a lot of that has to do with the desire to fit in, and looking for acceptance in the wrong ways. And the party just never stopped, and as I got into my later teens, just really anxious to experience a lot of the things that Vegas had to offer that were like off limits or taboo growing up. The strip seemed glamorous and everything that came with it. And, my story of drug addiction, it did span 15 years. Mostly, it started with alcohol, and then, was introduced to substances that could, you could take, and you could drink a lot and you wouldn't really get as drunk, and so that allowed, the party just to continue. And I would say functional user until my mid-20s. I was able to hold a job here or there and show up until, every Friday I was taking off to start the party early, and then couldn't show up Monday. And, that was the cause of me losing most of my jobs until, I like to talk about, everybody has a different rock bottom, and I hit several rock bottoms, but there's a trap door at every rock bottom. And as my addiction escalated, so did my ability to just adapt to circumstances, which ultimately led me into homelessness. And I had lost pretty much all sense of passion, or I had no why. And when you're immersed in that lifestyle, it just begins to feel normal. You know what I mean? And so for some people, a rock bottom could be losing a job. And then they're like, oh, I got to snap out of it and make some changes. And I would lose a job and think, well, that was their loss. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, I'm really grateful actually now for all those experiences, because they molded me into the person I am today. They helped me discover my why and my passion and my burn. You know what I mean? And I know that, we're on here talking about high performers, and I still struggle with the mindset of, am I a high performer? You know what I mean?
Yep.
Statistically, I think fewer than 2% of the people that end up becoming addicted to meth and resort to IV drug use are able to crawl out of the hole. So I feel very blessed and grateful that, through a set of circumstances, I was able to, and with a lot of people's help, make that transformation in my life. It started with a run-in with the law, which I never would have thought I would be grateful to be arrested. But, after a series of arrests, I went to a drug court program, and that was where I had a shift in my mindset, and I was just tired, man. I was tired of the shitty thoughts. I was tired of beating myself up mentally. I was tired of constantly being engulfed in guilt and shame. And I think something divine happened, and I decided to take a new road.
Love that, mate.
And it was scary.
Yeah, I can imagine. You did mention that you experienced several rock bottoms.
For sure.
So, which one was kind of the last one where you'd be like, right, this is actually? Was it when you went to the drug thing that the court put you through?
That was a blessing. That wasn't a rock bottom. I mean, just to name a few, I ended up getting involved with some people that were distributing and manufacturing meth.
Wow.
And that became a part of my lifestyle for several years. I spent 6 weeks in the UMC burn care unit as a result of being burned, 60% of my body being burned in a meth lab fire. There was a time I was hospitalized and in septic shock and almost lost my life. None of those things scared me, though. That's what's scary. And that's why I relate with these people out on the streets that are willing to just settle for, whether it's living in a tunnel or whatever the circumstances may be. I relate with it, just being willing to settle for less and less and less. So my ultimate rock bottom was a combination of many previous rock bottoms, just being mentally and physically exhausted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's interesting because one of my previous guests, called Dorian Wormsley, he's sober now.
I know Dorian.
Yeah, Dorian. So he was mentioning, and similar to you in the sense that there was a few occasions where, that would have been that's it. But then he went back and started drinking again. And then it's funny how it's similar, but obviously so different in the sense that rock bottom wasn't actually the rock bottom. There's a few more stages to it.
Well, what happens is we tend to get well for a little while, and then our ego and pride creep back in, right? And we think, well, you know what? I was just doing it wrong. I was here. I could moderate it. I could shift this. I can manipulate things so that, I can drink, or, like others I see drinking successfully, or, I know some successful people that use substances occasionally, music festivals and things like that. You know what I mean? So for 6 years, I spent in and out of this mindset that okay, it's because I grew up with a dad that taught me anything is possible, right? If I can see it, I can believe it, and I can achieve it. And I was just trying to channel that mindset into the wrong things. And so, I was 32 when I ended up in jail for the last time, and like I said, it wasn't the arrest. It was just while I was sitting in jail, because I got into the drug court program, I still couldn't stop even with these consequences and a prison sentence hanging over my head. But it was those three weeks I spent in jail that gave me enough consecutive moments of clarity to make a decision. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually bankrupt. I made the decision. When I get out, I'm going to do something different. And as hard as it was, I just had an incredible amount of people around me telling me it's one day at a time. Don't future trip. I see a lot of people, whether it's business or fitness or substance use recovery, I see a lot of people giving up too soon because they don't get the results they want quick enough, right? It's the same thing with my physical fitness journey. When I stopped using meth, I was 150 pounds soaking wet. And in that first year, knowing nothing about nutrition, I had been starving my body for so long, all I did was eat. And I put on about 100 pounds in a year.
That's some good going.
So I traded a lifestyle of homelessness and addiction for, I was able to hold a job, but I had switched my addiction to food.
Yeah.
And then I became a husband and then a father and a workaholic, and I'm overweight, And I didn't realize that my body had developed into a ticking time bomb. And this was a rock bottom moment with my fitness journey. I was carrying my youngest son down the stairs and had some kind of like a diabetic. I didn't go into a diabetic coma, but I blacked out holding my son walking down the stairs. And I went to the hospital and they did lab work. And that was probably the first time in 20 years I'd had lab work done. And they were like, you are a mess, dude. You need to go see a doctor and you need to get, some things turned around. And so I had a friend of mine that was actually in the program. He was a heart surgeon and I met with him one-on-one and we went over my labs and he said, you're not going to see your kids graduate high school unless you make some changes. And when it comes to my kids, that was a rock bottom moment. Mm-hmm. That was the moment I decided I needed to do something different and address my health. And to be honest with you, smoking cigarettes, like that was the hardest addiction to break.
Interesting.
The second hardest was the food. And then, I made the mistake of trying CrossFit as my first introduction to
straight in the deep end.
To getting some exercise. And like in my first 3 weeks, I had a couple injuries and I was like, this isn't for me. So, then I'm on this journey about like, how do I fix my health? You know what I mean? And it wasn't something I really wanted to do, but it's something I needed to do.
Yeah, no, I love that. And just circling back to what you said about like taking it day by day.
Yeah.
One of my favorite, I don't know who said it, but like Usain Bolt trained to win the gold medal. He ran for just over 9 seconds and he trained for 4 years.
Yeah.
And then people give up after 2-3 weeks.
Right.
So again, I absolutely love that. And I can imagine the frustration, but also the huge moments of like self-pride and happiness when you kind of overcame the addictions, but then another addiction creeped in.
Yeah.
So then it was getting everything under control. And what I love is the fact that you just, going back to what you said, is taking it day by day.
Yeah.
Because if you think too far in the future, it's sometimes that goal, whatever it is, for someone, business, fitness, can seem so far that then they get and be like, oh, I'm never going to reach that.
Yeah.
I'm never going to get there.
We have to break it down into bite-sized pieces.
Absolutely.
Instead of like focusing, how am I going to lose 100 pounds?
Yeah.
It needed to be, how am I going to lose 5 pounds?
Yeah. Well, this is exactly what I do with my clients. They come to me and they want to lose, like, let's say, just 20 pounds.
Yeah.
But just saying, oh, we're going to lose 20 pounds is still quite an overwhelming goal.
For sure.
So then we just lose 1 pound 20 times.
That's
keep chipping away.
Yeah, so that's one thing I learned in the program was, the program of recovery for me was incredible because like I actually got sober not only in a drug court program, but I utilized a 12-step recovery program. And like I didn't realize there was like there's a chapter in this book called How It Works, and it like breaks down like how it works. You take like one step at a time. And so utilizing that process to heal myself from my substance use addictions, it was natural that I was encouraged to apply that to the other things that I was battling. You know what I mean? I had to admit I was powerless over food. I had to come to believe that like a recovery was possible, and then I had to make a commitment. And making a commitment is, I think, for a lot of people, the most difficult part. Making a commitment and like sticking to it. A lot of people commit. You know what I mean? Like, when I was trying to stop smoking cigarettes, it was probably 3 months of, okay, today's my last day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then tomorrow, and then every day that goes on that I don't keep my word to myself, I'm feeling shittier and shittier about my inability to keep my word even to myself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's, again, just going into like the mindset stuff with how I coach. It's all about stacking up evidence to kind of prove to yourself that you can do it.
Yeah.
Because when you commit to something that's in the far future, whether it's whatever it is, you don't know if you can get there because you haven't been there before.
Right.
So the only way to do that is, again, like you've said, put the building blocks in place, take it day by day, and every day you're essentially stacking up more and more evidence to prove yourself right.
Yeah. A lot of it boils down to humility too. I'm a pretty stubborn guy, very resistant to authority, think I have all the answers. And so like the events leading up to, me getting clean and then getting into business were very helpful when it came to creating, dreaming, becoming a visionary, setting a goal, understanding behind the goal has to be a plan of action. You know what I mean? And I need to even break a plan of action down into like segments so it doesn't feel so overwhelming.
Yeah, just strategic planning.
Yeah.
And everything's got a purpose. I think when we're committed to something, every meal, every rep, every business call, every podcast has got a purpose behind it.
Sure.
And when we have a purpose, I think anyone and everyone's a force to be reckoned with.
That's right. And sharing our stories, is powerful.
Yeah, so again, mate, sorry to cut you up, but just going back into kind of the mindset of where you were. The mindset of making that decision, like you said, you spent 3 weeks of those days where you had those, like, stacking up the clarity, one after the other.
Yep.
But then that still probably doesn't scratch the surface to what it was like when you went back into the real world.
Sure.
So what was the first decision that you made and you stuck to?
So I had three weeks in jail.
Yeah.
And with every breakfast that was served, my commitment and my resolve became greater and greater. As funny as that sounds, I knew that the lifestyle I was immersed in, if I didn't change, I was going to end up back in jail for sure, or prison. So that did help me. But my first little success was the day I was released from jail. I had some options, I could go back to the plug's house and show him how I looked after 3 weeks, put on a few pounds and, you know what I mean? Celebrate getting out of jail, or I could take my ass to somewhere where I could get some help.
Mm-hmm.
And, I believe in a higher power, and I got out of jail and I made a phone call to a guy I knew that I heard speak at a meeting at a treatment center I was at years before. And I said, I need help. I don't want to go back to the lifestyle I was living. I'm scared. I have nowhere to live. And I need help. And he said, if you want help, meet me at this location at this time tonight. And I said, well, I don't know how I'm going to get there. I don't have a car. And he said, ride the bus. And he hung up on me. And I knew right then and there that the decision I made that day was, I was at a fork in the road in my life. And I knew that the decision that I made right then that day was going to impact my future greatly. And I went to a bus stop and I got on the bus and I told the bus driver, I just got out of jail, I have no money, and I desperately need to get to this meeting location. And he let me ride.
I have so much time for that. So there's the bus driver and that decision for you to get on the bus completely changed.
I didn't have $2.50 for a bus ride.
So then, again, what was after that meeting and whatnot? How did you go about finding a job, starting to build up your finances, having a place to live, and still working on everything that you are working on?
So my first day, I'll finish out that day because that day is really important. I I found a place to stay that night, and I went, and I remember I was so full of anxiety and fear. Somebody had told me, I heard somewhere like a lavender bath helps you relax. And I found some lavender pearls. I don't know. I can't remember how. This was 20 years ago, but I took a lavender bath, and I was laying in the bathtub, and I remember thinking, like, dang, like, I've been out of jail all day today. Like, I could have done a lot of things. I could have walked to the plug's house. I could have, done what I used to do, but instead I humbled myself. I asked for a free ride on the bus. I went to a meeting. I spent about an hour after that meeting talking to who became my sponsor, and he talked to me about humility. And he asked me a question. He said, based on the results in your life today, do you think you're the best person to manage your life? And I said, no.
Yeah.
Based on he asked me some pretty direct questions. He said, are you willing to take some advice? And I said, yes. And he talked to me about humility that night, and how humility is, in this context, being teachable. Are you coachable? Are you willing to put in the work and take direction, and not just give me lip service? Are you really willing to do this? And I said yes. And that was the first night I went to bed. That was just a huge success for me, to have been free on the streets and not got high and not gone back to those familiar places. And I went to sleep sober that night outside of jail for the first time in over a decade.
That's massive.
And I remember waking up the next morning thinking, dang, like, I didn't wake up in jail. I didn't get high yesterday. If I can do that yesterday, there's a shot I could do that today. And I just immersed myself in the program and found people that I could hang out with that wanted the same things I wanted. And there was, in the program I was going to, there's, they teach you to be of service and give it back. And like, I went to a meeting the next day where it was a younger crowd, and they just like swarmed me. Like, they just welcomed me in. A lot of people took my numbers. I'm like, that's weird. Like, people asking me for my number. But I started getting some calls later on the day and that evening, like, hey, how are you? Like, nobody gave a rat's ass about how I was out there, in the scene that I was used to.
Yeah.
Nobody called me to like see if I needed something to eat or like, So I get a couple days in and I go back. I frequented this little mini mart off of Sierra Vista and Maryland Parkway. And if you don't know what that area is like, it's crime, drugs, gangs. So I went back and the manager there knew me because I spent a lot of time playing nickels there. And she's like, where have you been? And I said, well, I just got out of jail, and I'll be honest with you, like, I'm 3.5 weeks sober and I just need a job. And she's like, are you willing to work for $7.25 an hour? And I said, I'm willing to do anything. Mm-hmm. So I got a job at this little mini mart selling 40 ounces and oil burners, which are really meth pipes, to people in the area that I used to run in. That was humbling.
Was that also not difficult to then go back to the same location whilst being successful at staying sober, and then to be, because I'm sure you bumped into familiar faces and
sure.
Yeah, was it not, did they not try pull you back into that scene?
Of course. I got a lot of invitations, but I had made a commitment. For the first time in my life, I had made a commitment. And one day at a time, keeping my word to myself, I started to become a believer. I had no idea where my life was going to go. Like, at that time in my life, I remember thinking, dang, like if I could get a job at a car wash making tips, you know what I mean, and get myself settled into one of these weekly apartments, pay a couple weeks in advance. Like I didn't have a car, I didn't have a driver's license. I just thought like that would be like that would be cool, you know. And I was out of resources, so I was kind of forced to explore the community safety net. And I went to the county, and the county provides rental assistance, so I got a county voucher. I was able to get a little studio apartment, enrolled in the food stamp program. You know, these are very humbling things to do when, you know, in the years prior, you know, when I was making and distributing meth, which is all on the record, I was used to like a lot of cash coming and going, you know what I mean? So to work for $7.25 an hour, get a food stamp card, rely on the county for rental assistance, those things were all demonstrations of willingness and humility.
Yeah.
And that's when I began to believe that, like, okay, maybe I'll be able to pull this off. And it didn't take very long. It took about 6 months before I started to feel comfortable again. I only worked at that mini mart for 2 months. Then I got a job as a limousine driver. And I thought I had arrived, man. I'm driving a limo around town. I'm making good tips. And I saw some things within that business and within that company that if I was the owner, I wouldn't be too happy about. And I asked for a meeting with the owner of the company. And I sat down with him and I started to tell him about some of the things I had noticed, being the new guy, how people were being treated. I would listen to the dispatchers and the office staff answer the phone and turn down work. And I just said, hey, like, I just bring in some of this stuff to your attention. And he was like, you know what? You're the first employee I've ever had that came to me that wanted to talk to me about how I could improve my business. Everyone else is here just to make their money and go home. And that conversation resulted in a really, really strong friendship developing with a guy named J.J. Bell, who I give all the credit for where I'm at in my life today. Aside from me actually like being willing to do the work, but that friendship developed into something significant that I never thought would happen. But the company was going through a transition. They were changing IT or technical platforms, and he started picking my brain. And one day I got an invitation, do you want to come off of the road and help me in the office? And I didn't know he was the owner. I didn't know they were looking for somebody to fill a general manager position.
Wow.
But I was 3 months sober, on probation, in drug court, and I got offered the job of becoming the general manager of this company. And obviously that guy saw something in me that I didn't really see in myself. But, you know, I just wanted to talk to him. I just wanted to talk to him about some things I would change. And that exploded into something beyond my wildest dreams. So I become the general manager of the company. I get a lot of hate because there's a lot of employees that have been there longer than me, and he discloses to me they were in a position, they didn't know if they were going to keep the company or not, wasn't very profitable. And I said, let me dig in here and help you. And so he and I together within about a year had turned the company into something that they didn't expect. We had like a fleet of 40 cars, ended up with like a fleet of 150, 40 employees, grew it to like over 300. And I was just there. All I wanted to do was work. And so he and I forged a really strong bond together. And that's really what gave me the ability or the platform to explore and create some of the ideas that I had, which are the Freedom House and Crossroads. And so first I gained his trust, and the first order of business was running that company. And then I would come to him with my wild ideas. And he was very impressed. I think he might have had some family that struggled, but he was very impressed with my dedication to my recovery, first and foremost. And he became an angel in my life. And I went to him one day and I said, I have this idea. And he was like, what is it? And I was like, there needs to be, like, what the recovery community's lacking is like a community of people like-minded. And this is how Freedom House was born. And he was like, you know what, I got a guy with a lot of real estate. Let's go have lunch with him. So I go and we sit down with this guy who's like probably almost a billionaire, and he owns so much real estate here. And I like ran my idea by him, and he's like, I got some buildings we could use. Oh, wow. And that's how Freedom House was born. You know, I was just authentic. I had an idea, didn't have a lot of money, but this guy was like, put a business plan together, do a pro forma. And I'm like, the fuck is a pro forma?
Yeah, you've lost me there as well.
What's a business plan? Like, how do I do a business plan? And so I started researching and figuring out like how to do these things. And okay, there's 55 units. We could put X amount of people in each unit. And like, you know, obviously I reached out for some assistance, but like I developed a business plan and I had a dream. And he arranged a meeting with the county commissioner, who I didn't know happened to be a friend of my dad's. And we sat down at dinner and I said, here's what I want to do. And this was in her district at the time. And she's like, are you crazy? Like, that's a horrible place to try to pull something like this off. And I was like, no, you don't understand. It's the perfect place, because I'm talking about helping the homeless and the indigent and the, you know, the drug addicted and the mentally ill get off the street and just start to get some help. And, you know, her blessing. And then we met with the sheriff, and then, you know, for whatever reason, this guy just bought into my vision, and he fronted the money to rehab these buildings. And I set off on a quest to get them licensed through the Department of Healthcare Quality and Compliance, which was like a whole domino of things, like, right, getting the buildings through the special use permit process. And I wanted to run them as a nonprofit, because one of the biggest obstacles for people coming off the streets is food insecurity. And 3 Square Food Bank had just opened, and I went to 3 Square Food Bank, and they're, well, you have to be a nonprofit to work with us. So it's like, how do I become a nonprofit? So researched, like, you know, literally downloaded the application off the IRS's website on how to apply to become a 501c3. So those first 3 years were just like, I was so excited because I was learning all these new things, you know. Yeah. And what I didn't know is that I was developing a program and that was going to attract so much attention that it actually became the #1 provider of housing and substance use treatment services to the very court I got clean in.
That is like full circle moment.
So on October 1st, we'll celebrate 15 years in business. And, you know, it took about 4 years, but we're now the provider of treatment services to the court that gave me my life back. Full circle moment for sure.
That's incredible. That's incredible, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it took a while to, like, for Metro to trust what we were doing, because they thought we were going to attract more criminals to, like, an already, you know, crazy area. And I'm like, no. These are guys that are trying to get their life together. I guarantee you we're not going to have, like, a lot of problems. And we haven't. I think in the 15 years Freedom House has been in existence, Metro or first responders may have had to come, I don't know, 7 or 8 times, you know. Another thing that happened those first couple of years was there were so many people that needed our services and I was like, we're not going to turn anyone away. So we lost about $300,000 our first 2 years. But I was talking to somebody and he was like, that's great news. I'm like, what do you mean that's great news? How's losing $200,000 or $300,000 great news? And he's like, that's your case for support. That's how you go into the community and say, listen, these people are out there, they need help, and they don't have a way to pay for it. and what is the cost to the community? Safety net, this is Metro, our county hospital, our first responders, our, businesses losing money because of theft. Like what is the economic impact to the community by taking one of these individuals off the street? And so we started putting some data together, and we produced a case for support. And I took that case for support and I started talking to people locally with some of the local family foundations about the need. And there was a few that said, that's not our gig. And there was a few that said, your story is amazing. We want to help. And so I was able to create a scholarship fund that we raise a couple $100,000 a year to fund, that provides services to people who are just have no resources, nowhere to go.
Incredible, mate. In
addition to the contracts and the other things that got the business, you got to run a nonprofit, obviously, as a business for it to survive. But very blessed in those first few years to be working with people who got it, who understood the vision, and who were bought in and helped it to happen. And then Freedom House just took off. We got contracts with the county and contracts here and grants, and it became a thriving business. And here's this formerly addicted homeless guy leading the charge. Nobody took me seriously the first few years, but it happened. And then once that was kind of stable, I set out on my adventure and formed Crossroads, which was on a whole other level.
Amazing, mate. And one thing that I picked up on a few times there is you talked about belief quite a few times. And it's interesting because as soon as you made this decision and that commitment to yourself, it's clear that dedication to always strive for better and for more. And yeah, when you were at the mini mart and then limousine driver, it wasn't what you're doing now. But usually where someone wants to get to, it's not a direct path.
For sure.
But your dedication and commitment is just like grown and grown and grown to now where you are now and what you're doing now.
Sure.
But in those first instances with your self-belief, because for me, when self-belief's a funny one because I'll never fully believe that I can achieve whatever it is, but I've got enough confidence that I can get close. If that's just the weird way my mind works. I
relate to that.
But with your self-belief, did you ever realize that this wasn't for you? Or did you ever have that question and be like, is this what I want to do? Or was it just unwavering, this is it?
I went through some very difficult times. I always talk to my people about it too. It's like the feeling of being in a pressure cooker. Like, can we pull this off? Is this going to work? I was fighting an uphill battle. I was a convicted felon. I didn't have a lot of money. I had all these things that people would use, the naysayers would use to try to convince me that my dream wasn't possible. But then I had louder people in my ear telling me, don't listen to that. How do we come to believe? How do we build self-esteem? How do we build confidence? By keeping our word to ourselves, by doing esteemable things, And so that process is probably the hardest, and that's where we lose most people. Whether it's, and we haven't even got into my fitness journey, but whether it's in business or in relationships or in a fitness journey, not getting immediate results, not having the ability to persevere, and not getting an immediate reward for our work is what causes a lot of people to, I think, recidivate.
Yeah.
Or give up.
Yeah, 100%.
You know what I mean? I wasn't willing to give up. Sometimes our ego can work in our favor. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a fine line.
I had sold my dream to some people who had invested a lot of resources in helping me make it happen, which, by the way, were all repaid. You know what I mean? But I knew I had some people who had invested a lot in my dream and believed in me. And like, how could I not believe in myself? Like, I was able to sell this dream to somebody else, but not believe it myself, you know?
Yeah.
So I hate the term fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
But we have to think our way and act our way into a different lifestyle. And so it wasn't really faking it until I made it. It was more so thinking my way into achieving the goals I had set.
Yeah. I can relate to everything you just said. And one thing that, like, 'cause I have a therapist and a mentor and delegate all those areas. And one thing my mentor said, which hit me quite deep, but that's what works for me. Anything kind of that just goes 3 layers deeper and just gets straight in. And what he said to me was like, on a call, he said, Tom Watts is dead. And I was like, what do you mean? He went, who you are and how you're living your life right now, he's dead.
He's dead.
Who do you want to be? And then I said what I want to achieve, how it's going to look, etc. And he's like, right, what are they doing? How are they thinking? Live like that.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I started to adopt it, you start to really, you're changing your identity to the person that you want to become. And for someone that might not understand that, it might sound a bit far-fetched, but what you're essentially doing is changing your actions, behaviors, habits, your lifestyle to achieve what you truly want. Because I'm sure you may be able to relate, but for me, with my own journey and coaching, people will want to achieve a £100 loss like yourself, which we'll go into. But they won't, they'll be scared of what that looks like and feels like without actually getting there, because they don't know how that person thinks, acts, feels.
Yeah, you really need to be able to visualize.
Visualize, then action on those visions, which the action is the hardest thing. It's just like, do the thing. Just do it. I suppose that's Nike's slogan, which works pretty well. But
yeah.
With your £100 journey, I know that it must have been really difficult, like super difficult, because you mentioned about the kind of addiction with the nutrition side of things.
Sure. I was addicted to fast food.
Yeah, and then you literally jumped off a cliff straight into High Rocks.
Did you see the short reel I reposted today?
I know, I might have missed
the
that.
guy that owns, he's like, I fucking relapsed on McDonald's. It's so funny, like, but it's true. Food can become an addiction. Sugar is like crack.
Mm-hmm.
Sugar is like just like crack cocaine.
Yeah,
And it's the worst thing. And it's like, it was my love. It became the substitute for my drug use was sugar, in the form of carbs or just raw sugars or whatever. But like, I couldn't get enough.
Yeah, and it's that, I don't know about you, but as soon as, like, even now, like, I'll have a little bit too much chocolate, and it's that 10, maybe 30 seconds of enjoyment, and then it's gone. Yeah. So you're constantly chasing that feel of, like, the dopamine hit, or that hug of a cheeseburger or whatever it is, because it's so, and especially in America, mate, within 5 minutes you can have any cuisine at your door. So it does, the temptation slaps you in the face, and all the commercials and everything is just all about the kind of food, and be like, oh, come try this new burger.
The one thing that has not worked for me with regards to my diet is like complete abstinence from anything. But what I did learn was that, and this isn't something you can apply to like a crack or a meth addiction, is moderation.
Yeah.
Well, I can't anyways.
No, yeah.
You know what I mean? But as I started to, I talked about like that first 5 pound loss, obviously in every area of life that I want to become better at, you seek people out who've been there, done that can help teach you and coach you. And so I had this guy I worked with, a dear friend of mine, and we would go to lunch together, and I would order, the meal and a side of chips and a side of this and a side of that and a side of that. And he's like, dude, why don't you just like eat a sandwich and have a drink? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so just like planting these little seeds and ideas into my brain, like making slow changes with regards to my diet. Before I met with an actual nutritionist, before I found out I was type 2 diabetic, like just like those little words of advice really like helped me, like, and I like it when people call me out on my shit too. It's like, dude, you talk about not feeling good and you're overweight, but like, you're eating 3 meals a day and it's 2,000 calories a meal. And like, so like my fitness journey started like slowly. But yeah, food addiction is just like substances.
Yeah. And I think the key point, what you said there is, you started slowly. And obviously with the moderation with food, because this is where people kind of want to achieve too much too soon.
Yeah.
So that's where the fad diets come in, and they'll start training 3 times a day, and they'll be like, why am I not seeing results? Because, well, it's also just been a week. So
I laugh, but it's not funny. Anyone that thinks they're going to see noticeable results in a week is,
yeah,
it's a form of mental illness almost.
Yeah.
And I experienced it.
Mate, I still, like, to this day, but it's the understanding of how it happens and like the why. So I'm working with many different people in many different industries. So my advice to them will change depending on home life, how many hours they work, what they do for a job,
Sure.
everything. Yeah. But one thing I don't do is go so aggressive with their nutrition, because A, that's just going to make them not enjoy it, and they're not going to stick to it.
Yeah.
Because
almost sets them up for failure.
Exactly. So what we focus on is obviously creating that to push them more towards their goals, but still slowing down the journey slightly so that energy is still high.
Right.
And they are still having that commitment and enjoyment.
Right.
And the two things, I've said it many times, but sustainability and enjoyment.
Yeah.
Like, if you're enjoying something, it's going to be more sustainable. And if it's sustainable, the changes that you're going to achieve
for sure
are going to last longer.
Same thing in recovery.
Yeah.
And, recovery from substances, that's why they push the 1 day at a time concept on you so hard, is because like just coming out of that lifestyle, or just like if I'm 100 pounds overweight and I have body dysmorphia and I don't get the results I want right away, I'm going to quit, right? And so in the recovery world, 1 day at a time literally means like there are obviously things in our life we have to plan out. Mm-hmm. But can I just do this 1 day at a time? Can I not use 1 day at a time? Can I try 1 day to eat smaller portions? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's why the 1 day at a time thing is so important to me, is that I'm going to future trip and I'm not going to get the results I want in my life quick enough. And that's what's going to send me right back out to my old behaviors.
Yeah. And I've got so much time for that. And I suppose that 1 day at a time mentality and format allows you to, again, have a productive day and just be like, right, I'm going to do this today. And you're going to focus on stacking up that evidence, which we mentioned. And then the momentum from that day over the course of the weeks and months, you're going to be able to either spread that to 2 days, 3 days, a week. Mm-hmm. But what you're going to achieve in that day gets greater and greater. So then your level of like standards, and you're basically constantly creating a new normal. So your standards are always higher. And we all have an off day. We all too tired to go to the gym. We've had a shit day at work, whatever it is. Yeah. And those standards that you've been cementing and building, they're what you fall back on.
Yeah.
And it's all about like the foundations. So
right.
This is why it's important to go slowly, but strategically as well. not being lazy or complacent or satisfied by going slowly, because everything's got a purpose.
Right.
And it's just, again, creating that journey which you can honestly just stick to and enjoy being a part of.
Yeah.
Was there, with your incredible journey, the fitness journey, was there like a turning point where you were like, I know you mentioned about like the £5, but when you got to like £20, £30, where it just ignited another fire underneath you?
Yes. When my 40 size waist was, when my pants were too big and I had to go down to 38s, that was an incredible moment.
Yeah.
I hadn't, and then going from a 38 to a 36, another incredible moment. It's those little successes, those little wins. So I had a guy, thankfully, that said, just don't get on the scale. Just don't get on the scale. We're going to work out, and we're going to see how your clothes start fitting differently. And I was so excited when I had to start buying smaller. I was a 2 or 3X, button-up shirt.
I'd love to see a picture, mate, because I can't imagine that. Sitting across from you now, I can't imagine you.
I'll send you a before. Yeah. I'll send you a before and after.
That's incredible.
I'll show you. I have it on my phone. But yeah, so those little wins, add up. And in business too, like you have this plan, right? This goal you want to achieve, but it still needs to be broken down into and prioritized into like, okay, what do I need to do next? Mm-hmm. A business plan can be very overwhelming. You know what I mean? Especially because nothing goes right the first time. And when I set out to open Crossroads, which is a full-blown medical facility, medical detox services, I employ doctors, 80 nurses. It was the wildest plan I could have ever come up with. And in order to pull it off, it really had to be broken down into so many different sections and with so many different people executing. That one I'm very proud of. Crossroads, and it's serves thousands of people a year, and it's just such a needed service in the community, and it wasn't just me, obviously. It was me, and I had a bunch of people with like-minded and who had lived experience, together coming up with like, all right, this 30-day treatment model really doesn't work long term for most people. So like, what can we create? And we came up with an 18-month plan rather than a 30-day spin dry. And we knew from our own experiences that like, a treatment center can tout these high success rates of people that come in and complete, but like it's easy to stay sober for 30 days when you're in a treatment center. But what happens when they leave? That's where the disconnect was. So we started to develop this continuum of care and develop a case management system and track people and hold them accountable and have them engaged. And, I would relate that to my fitness journey in the sense that, working with a coach who can help me, A, keep my expectations realistic, and B, continue to encourage me in meaningful ways to keep going, even though I wasn't seeing. You don't see results, especially when you're fat. It's like, I wish AI was back then. Well, I guess I could have cut my face out, my fat face, and put it on like somebody's body that, what do you want? Now I could hey, AI, show me what I would look like if I was thin and fit, whatever. But you have to be able to visualize it, right? Or believe that it's possible to get there. The fitness journey, I'm super, super grateful that I had mentors and coaches in that area of my life, because I don't know where I'd be. I might be dead.
Yeah, that's a scary thought, and we don't need to go there.
No,
but
I'm grateful I'm not.
With kind of you going through that fitness journey, did you notice any key changes in the sense to your, well, obviously mental health, energy, and kind of using it as an outlet to work, giving you that kind of distraction, but you're still working on yourself. Could you name any direct links from having a coach, working on your health, working on your fitness, to kind of Crossroads and all the other ventures that you've got?
Of course, and that's what shaped the mentality I have today about like life being in harmony. Some people like to talk about work-life balance, and I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe I have a life, and one section of my life has to do with how I'm sustaining myself, and another is my spirituality, my mental health, my emotional well-being. You know what I mean? And so all these areas of my life need to work together in harmony for me to show up as my very best self, right? So to be honest with you, my fitness journey was very difficult in the sense that like I didn't want to work out.
No.
For 2 years. It took me going 5 days a week for 2 years before it became something I wanted to do. And it was the same with the recovery journey. Like, I didn't want to go sit in these groups where the majority of people I thought were just playing victim and complaining, you know what I mean? I didn't really see the benefit to that, but I went anyways, I didn't want to go to the gym. I was lazy. I didn't feel good. I was overweight. I was constantly comparing myself to the fit guy in the gym. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So,
looking in the mirror, I didn't like what I saw. But over a period of time, like that started to change. And that this is where like, a mentor or a coach in my ear is saying, you just can't give up. The only way to fail is to quit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then eventually going to the gym became something I looked forward to. And then eventually it became something that if I was going to the gym, I wanted to eat better. And then it became, if I'm going to the gym and that's a part of my regular daily routine, if I missed a day, I didn't feel right. But that doesn't happen overnight.
No.
You know what I mean? Today, like if I don't go to the gym, like I go 6 days a week. I take one rest day, but and I'm not working. 3 of those days I'm working out really hard, like pushing my PRs. The other days I'm doing some cardio and I'm just, making it a routine and working on different things. But and I have a fitness coach to this today, but it's nice when you can cross that bridge of it becoming something you have to do to becoming something you want to do. And that just takes a commitment, and that just takes time. Yeah. And that's why I see so many people failing in whether it's business or physical fitness or their recovery journey or in relationships is they just say like, it's just not happening fast enough. I give up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm grateful I didn't just come up with these ideas, I just was committed to doing the work.
Yeah. And you learn a lot on the way. Yeah.
And little successes turn into major successes. I didn't know that Freedom House was going to, one day almost operate on an 8-figure budget. I didn't know that the Crossroads was going to help save thousands of lives and do, tens and tens of millions of dollars a year in revenue. Like that wasn't my goal. That wasn't my why. My why is I wanted to help people. My why is I saw something broken in our safety net. My why is I wanted to help utilize the things that I had gone through in my life to help people believe that it could happen for them too.
Man, that's so powerful.
The money side of things has always been a byproduct of, you know what I mean, my why. When I got into solar, I was completely embarrassed and unaware that I didn't know that there was another option for solar, but B, I saw it as an opportunity to create opportunities for others. Because you don't have to go, if you're working for a solar sales dealer, you don't have to pass a background check. A lot of the majority of my team are second chancers. You know what I mean? And I saw an opportunity to help change these guys' lives. Some of them are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in an industry that's good for the environment. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
saving people money. Like, so my why over the years has become creating opportunity and helping others.
I can relate to that, mate. That's honestly, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
You know,
Is being able to help someone change their life just little by little, day by day. And I can tell just how much fulfillment you get from what you do.
I do.
And it's inspiring.
I do. I remember when I was taking a tour of the 3 Square Food Bank here, there was a quote on the wall, and it's become my favorite quote ever. It's a Zig Ziglar quote, and it says, "I can have anything I want in my life as long as I help as many people get what they want as possible." And like, I've really adopted that, and it's just become ingrained in me. Like, you know, creating jobs. Like, I didn't know, you know, years and years ago, I didn't know that I was going to end up signing close to 500 employees' paychecks. You know, I mean, imagine, you know, coming out of homelessness, drug addiction, you know, the things that I've been able to accomplish with a lot of help are things that I would never, like, if you were to tell me 18 years ago, like, this is where you're going to be at in 18 years if you just do the work, I would have never believed it.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that, mate. And like I said, it's inspiring. And I can tell whilst you're saying this, it's kind of like that moment where you're reflecting and understanding what you've achieved as well, which is amazing.
When you reached out to me, you're like, and I saw it's like the High Performance Podcast. Like, am I high performance?
Do you not think you are?
Of course, there's still I still got these 2 monkeys on my back, right? One's telling me I'm not good and not worth it, and the other one is like, you know, I still wake up with those thoughts in the morning, like, I'm not good enough, I'm not doing enough, you know. I still battle that. I don't know that that'll ever go away, and to an extent, I think that it's helpful that mental battle continues to go on, because like every morning I wake up and I have a choice.
Yeah, and
you know what I mean. I know which one I need to feed.
Exactly.
You know what I mean. And I'm not perfect. There's days where I do buy into that. Like, dang man, things are really tough right now. Like, this has been a tough year. The big beautiful bill has impacted, you know, one of the industries I'm in, and you know, the fear of like, oh, they're going to change Medicaid, and that's how the majority of our people get their services, and you know, so like navigating through those fears, I just have to be so rock solid, committed to what I'm doing that like I just have to shut down those thoughts in the morning and get up and just do the next right thing.
Yeah, I think high performance is, for some it might sound a little bit daunting, but my take on it is having the ability and doing your utmost to perform your best every single day. And enable for you to do that requires other areas underneath that to be on point. Right. So your energy systems, your sleep, your routine, and it's bringing everything up together. And like you say, not that work-life balance, but work is part of your life. So finding that balance within your work life and having a process that is all-encompassing rather than having different segments of your life.
Right.
So your relationships, your fitness, bring it all together as one and learn how to navigate each one that's right for you.
Yeah.
And by doing that, you then feel this momentum that you can't stop. It's harder to stop than it is to go forward.
One of the things, you know, you asked me, do you feel like you're high performance? You know, when I'm sitting here talking to you and I'm reflecting on where I was 20 years ago and like seeing what I've accomplished and the people I've been able to help, if I'm comparing myself only to me, I do think I'm high performance. The issue is sometimes we get caught up in comparing ourselves to others. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's where, and I've become really good over the years at minimizing that and only competing with myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But when I hear high performance, I'm thinking like David Goggins, and I'm thinking like, people who've like, like Elon Musk, and like, you know what I mean? Like, no, like if I compare myself and I look at the things I've accomplished, I think it is high performing.
Absolutely. And I think
overcome some of those things.
a lot of people compare with, for example, I'll compare myself to athletes, but that isn't a realistic comparison. So like you said, I look to those people like the Musks, the people that are creme de la creme.
Right.
And I don't compare. It's more of like finding pockets of inspiration that I can then implement.
Yes.
And I only compare myself to myself where I was last week, where I was yesterday, where I was last month. I reflect so much that it then creates kind of a mini action plan of, right, what needs to be done? And it's a constant cycle of just get better, just get better.
Especially with the social media platforms and the digital era we're in, and all the, it's so easy to like just look at somebody else and the results they have, but not really understand what it took to get there. I remember the first time I listened to Elon Musk talk about, being on the verge of bankruptcy and not knowing if Tesla was going to make it another week.
Now look at it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the more I study, the more I read, the more I really understand, these people that are ultra successful failed forward too. You know what I mean? We're not talking about people that like were born into like, $1 billion family. A lot of them, most I really admire, and I like to study the habits of highly successful people who came from nothing almost.
Yeah. And I think like Amazon, Google all started from like nothing.
Yeah, like I mean, even the CEO of Starbucks or the founder, his story is incredible.
Yeah, and those are those stories that give us that inspiration to be like, wow, okay.
It gives me inspiration now. In the beginning, it would have just completely shattered my ability to believe that I could do anything.
When I first started coaching on my first mentorship, the imposter syndrome was mental, because at the start of every call, they'd be like, everyone say, well done for Sophie earning 20K this month. And I'm like, what? I was earning like 300 quid. I was like, I'll never get there. So that was where I just, over time, just learned to silence that, because in my opinion, if you're constantly focusing on everyone else, you're not putting enough time into yourself.
For sure. That's where I see a lot of people going sideways.
Yeah.
Either that, or they want the result without putting in the work.
Yeah, that's
there's just no easy way.
No.
Whether you're overweight and need to lose 100 pounds, or homeless on the streets, there's just no easy way out of it, but just to do the work. And so many people just don't want to do the work.
And look for help.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or, you're right. Look for help. Like, how do I do this?
You still got to do the work, but at least you've got direction.
Yeah.
So I think that's very important, is having direction, because then there's no, it's limiting your confusion.
Yeah.
To be like, is this the right step, or is this the right step? But mate, to round this unbelievable session out, the one question I want to ask you is, if you could give your younger self one bit of advice, what would that be?
I think where I went sideways in my life, and even though I've turned it into something positive, the one piece of advice I would have given myself is to not be so hard on myself. and not lose faith in God. You know what I mean? Because it all, like, it started in my earlier years, making a few mistakes, feeling bad, making more mistakes, feeling bad. And then, you know, that escalates into like, God doesn't love me, you know, and not to, you know, I'm a spiritual person, not a very religious person, but I went pretty far astray, and now, you know, I see the meaning behind it, but like, I was pretty tough on myself. I didn't give myself a lot of grace, and that just, it's like lighting a fuse. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So.
I think anyone listening or watching to this, me included, can relate to that.
Yeah.
But mate, thank you, a huge thank you. Please let everyone know where they can find you and keep up to date with your whereabouts, mate.
Thank you. My Instagram handle is @JeffIverson. Very easy to find. I do respond to most messages. I'm here to help people or be of service wherever I can. I appreciate you inviting me on here. It gave me the opportunity to reflect on what does high performance really mean, and like, you know, even now there's a lot of days where I don't feel like I'm doing enough or I haven't accomplished enough, and I need to just chill now. Like, I need to take my own advice now. Give myself a little grace, like, you know, but it's sometimes it's those feelings that keep me moving forward, you know, and wanting more. Like, I always want to be hungry for more. I don't want to become complacent.
I love that.
So thanks for having me on.
Mate, thank you so much.
Yeah.
That was amazing.